Hey, Mohammed. Hey, Vaughn.
Hello.
Hi. Hi there. How are you?
Good. I'm glad you could make it.
Yeah, I'm glad too. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm
Good.
excited. Feels like we're big day, our first open meeting, and it's recorded too. So just so you know,
Okay.
it's being recorded right now. I mean, I don't know who will watch it, but you know. So I was gonna have people introduce themselves at our first meeting, but we all know each other. Just for the recording, I'm Carolyn Van Slyke, and I am one of the Porter maintainers. We also have Vaughn with us.
Hello, yes. I'm also a Porter maintainer. Work on the CNAB libraries as well, as does Carolyn.
Me, Mohammed, developer enthusiast. I'm very excited about Porter project and the mixins.
Oh, you're going to get your wish. We're going to be talking about mixins today. For
Yes.
Sure. So let me paste in a link to the agenda. Feel free, if you haven't already, to add your name to the participants list.
Yeah, sure.
You should be able to edit it. You may need to log in to HackMD first, but it is open, so everyone should be able to work on it. What I wanted to do today for our kickoff meeting is I had a busy weekend and took all the feedback people had given us about mixins and dependencies, and then wrote up 2 proposals that kind of took a lot of everyone's feedback and suggestions and made them into PEPs, P-E-P, a Porter Enhancement Proposal. It's kind of like KEP for Kubernetes or pip for, is it pip or pep? I forget, for Python, but they have one too. And we totally ripped them all off. So I thought first we could talk about Mixin versioning. What motivated this proposal was that every time you want to build your bundle, and maybe it needs a specific version of kubectl or the Kubernetes mixin, the Helm mixin, things like that. Right now, Porter has a single location where all the mixins are stored, and it doesn't distinguish between versions at all. So if you like install Helm 2.17 and then you install the Helm mixin 2.18, 2.17 gets overwritten. And it makes it very difficult then for bundles to kind of pin and say, I really need this specific version of the mixin. And it's important because like syntax and everything does change between versions. So what we'd like to do instead is be able to have a global mixin cache, which is kind of what we have now, but we'd like to be able to distinguish where the mixin came from and what its current version is. And then when we build a bundle, we've kind of always done this already, but we've done it very quietly, is that we actually copy the mixins that we're going to use locally into the bundles directory. And that's kind of like, I'm calling it like the local bundle, like the mixin cache for the bundle. And so I wanted to kind of talk like how this could work, right? A lot of people will be impacted by this change. Obviously, if you write a mixin, you're going to have to be able to start working with it specifically and understand that there's a new like schema in the porter.yaml. Similarly, if you're a bundle author, you need to start setting the version of the mixin you want to use. And as like a goodie for end users, when you run, for example, Porter Explain, we'd like to be able to show you what versions of mixins are being used as well. Like we're capturing some of this information when we build a bundle, but now we want to show people and be like, hey, this bundle uses Helm and Customize. Wait, not Helm and Customize. Uses Helm and kubectl, we'll say. And these are the versions. Are there any questions or comments before I just dive into what it looks like? Okay.
No.
So this would be the new Mixin cache. So we have Porter home, which is your user directory .porter. And we've always had a Mixin directory, but then underneath it immediately was just the Mixin. And so I've added a couple extra layers or directories that allow us to say, where did it come from and what's its version? So the source, I didn't type out an example, but say it came from cdn.porter.sh/mixins/exec. We changed the name a little bit so that, oh, I did put an example. Perfect. This is what it would look like. So source may be a couple deep. But it basically says, where did it come from? Because we want to avoid is maybe someone needs to fork the exec mixin, or the Helm mixin is another one where like the names kind of collide sometimes. And we'd like to be able to have Porter tell the difference between the two and have your fork of the Helm mixin and the Helm mixin installed at the same time. And Porter can tell which one you want to use. And then we have the name of the mixin, exec, the version, 0.33.1, and then the standard formats from here. I know that we kind of had a pending to do item. We've always had this, but we've ignored it. Right now, our runtime binary is called porter-runtime. And it's just assumed it's Linux AMD 64. I think as long as we're changing this entire directory structure, we may want to actually put that in the binary name because it'll allow us later when we want to support, for example, ARM as one of our target runtimes. We don't need to change this all over again. So I figure as long as we're in here modifying it, we can make the runtime binary name more explicit. But we wouldn't end up having more as part of this. Like we're not going to suddenly support ARM just by changing the file name, but it'll just give us a little bit of wiggle room later on.
Yeah, I know Ranf actually did dabble with this. He tried to install the Helm3 mixin on the ARM. His ARM, he had a Windows machine with ARM processor, and I know he tried to install a mixin with the ARM. We have an issue on the Helm mixin 3.
Yeah. He tried to do it specifically with your Helm 3 mixin?
Yes.
The official Helm 3 mixin.
I did some tweaks. It is not released, but you can at build time you can choose which architecture you want to build.
Is that in the current version or is that an issue?
Issue.
Okay. Is it?
Yes, this one.
Okay, let me link to that. Make sure that. Okay, good. This is good to have. Thanks for bringing that up. There we go. Okay, well then perfect. Now I don't feel silly adding in that change. One thing that I'm not addressing in this proposal, because I feel like it's a lot, is the security aspect and reproducible builds. So being able to say, I know for a fact that it really came from cdn.porter.sh, and nothing's been tampered with. The digests are all the same. Like there's more, right? I think that's going to need to be a separate exercise that we do after this to kind of give people that assurance that if we wanted it built a certain way, the cache basically can't be poisoned with the wrong binaries and we pick them up and accidentally use them when we build. Let's see here. Here I'm just kind of explaining what the two different caches are. It's not terribly exciting, but essentially the global Mixin cache will continually grow forever. Every time you use a Mixin, it'll be added there, and we're not going to remove it. It's another good thing that if you're a CI machine and say you're setting up like GitHub Actions to mark that directory, Porter Home Mixins, as a cached directory, so you don't have to re-download the Mixin over and over and over again. But you know how I mentioned the directory will keep growing. So you install version 1, version 2, version 3, just keep doing that for 50 versions. All of them will stay in the cache. We're probably going to need a separate proposal to look at how do we manage that? How do we prune things out of the cache over time and maybe remove unused things, or at least give people a command to deal with it so that they're not directly going into the Porter home and just nuking whatever looks like they don't need it anymore. But it didn't feel critical to like this exactly to have to do that all at once.
Oh, we can have a rule that say just keep the 3 latest Mixin that you have, the latest 3 latest versions.
Yeah, and so that's something that I think it seems like that is one possible way to solve the problem. I think that there are competing design ideas for that. So I want to just make that a separate proposal. And if you'd like to maybe start a discussion in the discussion board, we can kind of collect them and then make the next proposal. Because, for example, another way we could decide to prune it is when was the last time that Mixin version was accessed? Because I could see someone having 2 bundles on their machine that they build. One uses an old version of a Mixin and they don't feel like upgrading right now. And then the other one is a brand new bundle. So they started using the latest version of the Mixin. And at that point, removing, say, anything that isn't semantically the most recent versions could end up constantly triggering a used Mixin to be removed. And then, you know, and then having to download it again every time that older bundle is built. So I think that it was, for me, it was a little too complicated to try to put into this proposal all at once, but we want to do it. It'd probably just be a second like pass through on this feature. Okay. So one thing that's pretty big that we're introducing is the concept of a lock file. I know it's not like big as in mine exploding, but it
is interesting. It solves a lot of problems.
It's new to us. we didn't really implement that out of the gate. So now we have to implement it now. I looked at Terraform's lock file for their plugins as an example, and then kind of tweaked the format just to kind of look the way most of our config files look. So the lock file would have a list of all the Mixins, the name of it, and we'd want to say the source. For example, did I get it from this feed or not? We want to remember that because if someone decides to upgrade what Mixins their bundle is using, we need to know where to look for the updates. You know, having just the URL of where the file was downloaded isn't always enough. So I'm just capturing both. We have both pieces of information. And then for the binaries, I want to list all the binaries that Mixin ships. If I am currently building on Mac, I want to make sure I still include the Linux and the Windows binaries as well, so that if I'm collaborating with someone on the bundle and they have a different computer architecture than me, we're able to still verify that they have the correct binaries on their machine that they're building with. So that's why you see both. I probably should put Windows in there as well. And then so Porter, when it does a build and it's trying to figure out, I have a mixin in the cache, can I use it? You know, obviously the name needs to match. If it's called Helm, it's looking for mixin called Helm, but it needs to come from the appropriate place too. So if I got the one in the cache came from, say, the official feed for Porter mixins, but in my lock file, I actually used a fork, maybe my own personal fork. I fixed a bug. Yeah, I'm waiting for it to get merged, but until then, I want to use that with my bundle. Porter should be able to distinguish between the two and download the appropriate one for you if the URL doesn't match. And then the version. So here I have it set to say 33.1. If the bundle defined a range for what's an acceptable version for the mixin, and they change that range, maybe they change the range to 0.34 and up, then I don't want to reuse what's in the cache. I'd need to get a higher version. And then just as a really simple security check, because the digests are, for me at least, I feel like I kind of understand how to check the digests and feel like that's pretty safe thing to put in here. And this is, again, something that Terraform does. We can do that as well. If the digest for my mixin doesn't match, we've got a problem. I'm going to stop, but I'm not going to build with it. I don't know if that's the extent of what the security needs to be, but it's a good first step. Are there any comments on the lock file? Do you think maybe there's anything missing that should be in it? You can stop me at any time. I'm gonna keep going, but if you see something that looks weird, just let me know.
Should we, the log file will generate a digest for each mixin that is requested. For example, you have 3 or 4, and
Yes.
the overall digest. It's like Merkle tree. You have.
Can you maybe add a comment to the PR, or I'm not familiar with that you're talking about, but it sounds like it's really useful. If you just want to put a comment anywhere or just put it in the notes,
Yes,
of what that would involve, just because I don't immediately understand what that would be. Is it like a tree of every single file involved with the
yeah,
build,
each mixin will, let's say we have a mixin and it has its own digest, calculated digest, and you generate a parent digest that seals the other digest. And if the one of them change, the parent change. So automatically you know that is your bundle changed.
When would I compare the parent digest? What would that invalidate something, or maybe tell me I need to do something different? I'm just making sure I'm capturing this right.
I think it would just tell you that the bundle changed, so your digest changed.
Okay.
And I don't know how to act on that.
That's fine. I'm going to write out what I think we're agreeing on here. And if you could just review it when I make that change and let me know
Sure.
if I'm using it right. So I'm just writing this down so I can add that to the proposal. Oh, or feel free if you want to make the change too, just let me know. You should be able to add comments or suggest changes to it as well. But that makes sense. It'd be nice to have like one hash to be able to look at and say, is this out of date? looking at the mixin commands. By mixin commands, I mean porter, mixin, install, porter, mixin, list. We have this like group of multiple commands related to working with mixins. I think we could do two different things here. And I showed one design, but I am like open to something different. I want to do whatever is easiest for people to work with without making mistakes. Is sometimes you want to have that command look at the global mixin cache. For example, if I type porter mixin list, there's two different things I could want to do. I could want to see what mixins are my bundle using. What is it using? What version did it resolve? And it kind of gives you a pretty form of what's in the lock file. And just make sure that the lock file, for example, is up to date if you change the porter YAML, for example. Another thing you could want to do that I don't think is as often, but you could, is you may want to say, and this is how the command works today, what mixins are in the global cache. That's how that command works right now. So what I was thinking for all of these mixin commands, we could add a flag called global. And it would let you say, what am I looking at? Am I looking at my local bundle set of mixins, or am I looking at just everything that's on the computer? So I solved it with a flag, but if we feel that they either need to be two separate commands or a completely different way of dealing with the global mixin cache, that's fine too. So like, here's an example of two different ways it looks when global is false, which I think it may be useful to be the default when you're inside of a bundle directory. If you run porter mixin list inside of a bundle directory, show me what mixins I'm using. And then otherwise, if I just run this anywhere else on my computer, porter mixin list, without even specifying global, it should be able to tell me what's in the cache, the global mixin cache. I don't know if that is intuitive and really useful, or is setting people up for accidentally running the wrong command.
I think it seems okay with those defaults. When you list global mixins, I could see like maybe a handy follow-up command, which we don't have yet, I guess, is porter mixin show exec, and that would list all 12 versions of exec with exactly
that down.
Yes, that could be useful, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. If
Maybe.
I ran that same command inside of a bundle directory, would it maybe show, I guess it would still show where it came from, what its binaries are and everything. But at the global level, we would just maybe show an abbreviated format where it's a table of every version that's cached.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yes.
I could also see that this idea segueing into cache management, which, as you said, could be out of scope. So I don't know.
I think this is more of a show me command. We have the information. It's not difficult to see what it should be, what the command output should be. It's just some of the other ones I feel like we're going to need some more design on, with just keeping the cache size in control. So it's not like the Docker image cache, for example, that just grows forever. And you're like, is there some way we could run essentially garbage collection on occasion on the user's behalf to keep it in check so they don't just run out of disk space every 3 months like I do with Docker, you know? Because I do. Okay. Then we have these commands right now, like install, upgrade. We don't actually have that command, but we've always wanted it, so let's include it. installing a mixin, upgrading a mixin, and uninstalling. So let's just focus on install. I want to repurpose it so that it can actually edit your Porter YAML file and add the entry for the mixin that you want to work with. The idea being that most of the time we expect people to edit the YAML file by hand, but I've heard a lot from users that some of them are making bundles programmatically. And they appreciate command line commands that edit and manipulate files for them. You know, for example, generating a credential set file, you know, it's in that same usability space where you're like, I don't want to munge JSON and YAML by myself. Please help me with a nice command. So Mixin's install would either install the Mixin locally for just that bundle, right? And it would update the lock file and everything for you. Globally, it can install it into the global Mixin cache. Oh, okay, typo. And in that case, it would be more useful for, and that's what the command does today, right? It's useful for, say example, you're a company and you only want people using the list of approved bundles or something, and they want to pull them all once on their build server, and then not having the mixins be resolved dynamically and downloaded on the fly every time you build a bundle. Because maybe then they cut off internet access. Like there's various things people do. This would allow people to prefetch all of the mixins they need, go offline, and then do a build, stuff like that. Same for upgrade. It would either edit your Porter YAML and bump the version that you're using, or it would just upgrade what's in the bundle cache. Uninstall, I wasn't sure what to do. Right now, it just removes something from the global cache. I guess people would, it's weird to use it to remove a mixin from a bundle because you would just stop using the mixin, I guess. Like if I don't use Helm anymore, wouldn't I just stop using it?
I was about to say it could be the inverse of install in that it modifies the YAML to remove it, but then that could get tricky, like remove every mixin step.
Yeah, I don't think we should get in that business. I think if we have that command and we detect the mixin is used, I think we'd have to stop. But the really awkward thing is you can't tell when a mixin is used because they could always have written their own bash script that uses the binary that the mixin installed. Like, I'm not sure it's ever a safe command. So I don't know if y'all want to like think about it and vote on, do we just only have this command work at the global level? There is no uninstall at the local level. We just print a message saying, oops, no, you have to do that yourself.
I think it makes sense at global level, but at local level, you just have to modify your Porter file, and that's it.
Yeah.
Because you don't know if a user do install his mixin via script file, sh file. So you can dig and read his shell file that installed the mixins. And
I have a hard enough time writing bash, let alone smart parsing it to tell them someone's using a command.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll update it to make it just be global and then just have a warning message or an error message, really, if you try to use it locally on your bundle. Okay, so we've talked about a bunch about like using mixins and saying what specific version you want, and this is what it would look like. it's additive. It doesn't change the current schema for declaring a mixin, but it adds these 3 lines. And I'd like to have every mixin just support these 3 lines. Like they shouldn't think that it's their own configuration, for example. It's something that Porter would read and look at, and they just need to make sure they don't throw an error when this is present. I don't think the mixin itself needs to do anything with this data. Porter would act on it. So client version, for example, that's the mixin's own stuff. So it would just be Porter who would care about these. For version, I really like the way that it's a library called Mastermind Semver. And they let you just do 1.x, where anything from the X onwards can automatically be upgraded later. But it would pin you to version 1, or in the second example, 1.2.x, it would pin you only to patches for the 1.2 release. There are other supported formats, and you've definitely seen this in like your package.json when working with NPM. It's things like this, where it's a tilde or a caret. And you can even do ranges too. I just think that sometimes these are, you usually have to read the documentation to remember what each one does. And I feel like the X's are a little discoverable. You can kind of figure out what it's going to do.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. One idea is that we support everything Mastermind supports, because you can't actually exclude it. It's gonna work if they put it in there, but maybe we don't document it that way. We always document it with the way we think is easiest to work with. And then, as always, Porter is going to manage building the final giant schema document. All they'll need to worry about is, I want to get mixins defining what their configuration looks like. This client version right here, right now, if you defined that in VS Code and you looked at it in VS Code, it would show those red squiggles under client version, and it would get upset. So I want to make sure that mixins have instructions for how to document what config they accept in their schema as well, just as part of this, as long as we're going in here and changing it.
I have a question. For example, in Helm we have a client version, and we have, for example, you can pre-install a set of repositories.
Yes.
Should we include that, or it is too specific for the Helm mixin?
Oh, okay. So make sure I'm understanding. Each mixin can define whatever additional config they need, like client version, like the Helm repository list and credentials and everything. But Porter doesn't know anything about those. And the way you would communicate to Porter what those extra fields are that you accept would be adding this definition called mixin config when you run the mixin schema command. So here I demonstrated client version, saying it should be a string as opposed to an array or something like that. So Helm could define a second property called, is it repositories, I think?
Yeah, repositories.
And then go in depth and explain, like, it's an array, it can have these fields on each item in the array, etc. And Helm can put that all in just Helm's mixin schema, and Porter will be able to know where to look for it because it'll be called mixin config, and then inject it properly into the final schema.
Cool.
That seem okay?
Yeah.
Great. So this was a suggestion. Oh my gosh, I only know his username is like Sigursta. And I just probably annihilated that. He suggested this in the discussion forum to have the equivalent of Terraform init, where for Terraform init, any plugins that Terraform is using, it can fetch them ahead of time before it tries to run the plan. So what this lets us do is say ahead of time, download the mixins that are in my bundle and cache them so that it doesn't get resolved and downloaded just in time during the build. This is also similar to Go mod download.
Could you help me understand the difference between this and the Porter Mixin oh, and I gotcha. Yeah, Porter Mixin and install global. I was thinking that's per Mixin. This is like all the Mixins.
This is for the whole bundle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe people would want a command that acts on the global cache, similar to Porter Mixin install with global. But I felt like that started straying more into cache management. So I just kind of like noted that that was something people may want, but I'd rather wait until people ask for this stuff and understand the use cases better. And two, it just seems like we can kind of punt on that for a bit and still achieve what we really want, which is being able to build a bundle and have the mixins used by the bundle automatically downloaded. That's kind of been my focus whenever I say something is out of scope.
So we parse the portal.yaml. We parse, we build, we download only the mixins, and that's it.
It also updates the lock file.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So this kind of extracts logic that is a little bit in Porter build and moves it to its own separate command. Porter build will then use this implicitly, like in its implementation, but the user won't have to manually execute this command. It's just an option if they want to run it themselves. Similar to, we have a lint command that build automatically runs on your behalf, but you can always call lint yourself if you need to. I'm thinking it'll be something like that. So then during build, we're going to want to include all the extra information that we have about the mixin in the bundle.json. And lucky for us, we actually planned ahead for this. If you look at the schema right now for what we generate, we put in the name exec, and then we just leave an empty object, open curly brace and then a closed curly brace. But we have a spot then to put in all the extra information we have. And it's basically going to be everything that's in the lock file about the mixin, what was really used. We'll put that in here. Having this in the custom metadata, because we do have it in the Porter YAML and the lock file, and that's all inside the bundle, but having it here allows IT or the company or someone who's making assessments about the safety of the bundle or understanding, does this bundle have a known vulnerability? By being able to just scan, the metadata that's in the bundle without having to crack open the invocation image and try to find, files in it and things like that. So that's the idea behind this right here. And then the very last thing, and then we can talk about it. I don't think we're gonna get a chance to talk about dependencies, but the very last thing is for verification. I was talking about explain and wanting to be able to see essentially all this information that we put into the bundle JSON. I want to be able to see this in Porter explain. So instead of stopping with just, oh, here's the name, here's the version, and here's the parameters, the credentials. That's what explain gives you right now. Either explain or maybe inspect. Probably inspect would have been the better one. It should also tell you what mixins are used, where they came from, and what the version is. I don't know, just in case people aren't familiar with the difference between explain and expect. Explain is what you call when you don't know what the bundle does, and you're trying to figure out what flag should I pass to the bundle when I'm trying to install it. So the mixins aren't really relevant for that, but we have another command called inspect, and that's what I should have used here. Inspect shows you detailed information about all the images used in the bundle, including ones that maybe were referenced by Helm. And it gives you information about them, shows them their digest and everything like that. And it's more for that verification of the bundle and vetting what's inside of it. So I'll update this and put that there instead. That's what I have. Do you have any concerns, questions, or any gaps that you see in this?
I have one quick follow-up thought, a little bit delayed from the section just prior to verification, where we add in build the digest. It just really reminded me of like, image digest that we now verify kind of at runtime. Are you also imagining at runtime verification of mixin binaries per the digests listed in this section?
I hadn't thought about that, but I'll add that because it seems like a very straightforward check.
Cool. Yeah. Just because we
So verify the mixin digest at runtime.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that makes sense because here Porter's trying to say, this is really what I put in here. And just in case Porter lied or had a bug, I don't think someone could actually tamper with the invocation image because we do have those digests on there, but it is a good check for did Porter do what it said? No.
Yeah.
So we have 15 minutes left, I think. Yeah. Are you interested in looking at the dependencies proposal? There's no hope of us getting through it. I'm going to be showing it at the CNAM meeting next week as well, but if you'd like, we can just talk at a high level about it right now if you want to.
Cool.
Okay. This is a beast. It is, it's a very large document. So let me just talk about at a high level what problems it solves and what tools it's using to solve them, but I won't go into the detailed solution because, like I said, it's a very big talk. Let's just talk about the use cases right now. There are a couple different ways that you can say, I want a dependency, and this is how I want to be able to identify if my dependency is already available or if I should install that dependency fresh. Right now, Porter always installs that dependency for you. So if you install an instance of that bundle 6 times, you get 6 copies of its dependency, which may not always have been the right thing. For example, a database, you can share a database server, things like that, or a Redis instance, or whatever it may be. So I came up with a couple different use cases, and please tell me if you have more. One is, I need my own instance of this dependency. Every time I'm installed, give me a new instance of it, and it's just mine. Don't give it to anybody else. Okay. And that's how Porter works today. Another one, though, is I need the dependency to be present so that I can, for example, connect to it, get credentials from it, something interact with it. It's a dependency in some way, it needs to be there. But if I'm installed 6 times, there only needs to be one of those dependencies there. And one example for that is, operator lifecycle manager, or anything that's kind of like a globally installed thing in your cluster, you just need once. And then when you install 6 operators, you still only need 1 operator lifecycle manager. Another use case is very specific to microservices, and I mentioned them a bunch in here. The idea is that I have really a larger application, you know, whatever it is I'm shipping, it may be composed of 6 different microservices, but they usually all get deployed together and they get upgraded together and they get to share resources amongst themselves. So they all need a Postgres database. They actually all need the same one because there's a users table inside that database and they all need to be able to see the same users. So I want to be able to share that. But if somebody else installs something that needs a Postgres database, they don't get to have mine. The idea is just my application is sharing that database. This other use case, I feel like people always forget to add it, but it's one of the most requested features in any software dependency management system is I installed things before your tool existed. I didn't use Porter to install an on-premise SQL server, you know? I've had this for 3 years and there's no way it can ever be changed, right? It's never going to be installed with a bundle. But when people install new things, I want them to be able to use it. So we need to be able to give people a way to have bundles, access resources, and be aware of resources that are available to them that weren't made by Porter, is the idea. The last use case, and I had honestly, I had to Google it because I forgot. I was like, interfaces, yes. What is it called? Polymorphic. And so what I'm saying here is that I need a MySQL database. I don't care if the MySQL database is local on my cluster and it was installed with Helm. I don't care if it's Azure managed MySQL. I don't care if it's Google managed MySQL. I don't care if someone made a VM and then installed it themselves by hand. As long as I can get a connection string, I can use that database. Because what we want to avoid and what we're seeing people do right now is say they have a bundle that installs WordPress and WordPress needs a MySQL database. They're going to end up right now making multiple copies of that bundle. And the only thing that's changing is the infrastructure that's providing that database. They'll just change the dependency and be like, now I depend on Azure MySQL. Now I depend on Google MySQL or whatever. But nothing about the actual bundle itself has changed. So this allows us to identify bundles that satisfy an interface and be able to swap them out and have Porter help do that. This is the trickiest. I used to work on Kubernetes service catalog. This was a big, big problem that we tried to solve. So that's blatantly where I stole this use case from. Are we cool with these all being in scope for this proposal? And are there any missing use cases that you're aware of?
I can't think. Oh, go ahead, Mohammed.
I was about to say it's covered a lot.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of another use case yet. We can brainstorm on it, but echoing Mohammed's statement, it does seem like a lot, but they could still be in scope in like limited capacity. Like maybe this PEP doesn't explain how all of these would work, but could kind of lay the groundwork for them. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Yeah. Every single one of these of these first four, exclusive, global, scoped, and user provided, use the same mechanisms to resolve the dependency. They all use namespaces and labels to accomplish how to do this. So I think they kind of all go together. If we split anything out, I think it would be the polymorphic one, because it relies on a little bit of extra smarts and information that the other ones don't. So I could take a pass at this and just look at being like, we know we want to do this, but if we delay doing it, it doesn't impact the design of the first four.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to consider, especially looking at, the title of this PEP, Dependency Namespaces and Labels.
You gonna call me out on that, huh?
Which, as you just said, covers the first four, but as interesting as polymorphic resource is, it's fascinating. It could maybe be broken out.
Yeah. How about Mohammed? Are you cool with this? Do these feel like this is moving dependencies in the direction that you needed it to go?
Yeah, I think it covers a lot of the use cases that we run to. Only the polymorphic resources, I think it should be more declarative. Then the user should be more declarative, and instead of Porter trying to do service discovery and all that. Other than that, it seems cool.
Okay. I will split it out, and then, because I feel like the labels and namespaces are very straightforward. There's not a lot of, if you're cool with using labels and namespaces, the way it's implemented isn't, there's not a lot of like controversy. Polymorphic, yeah. I avoided service discovery, but I use other things to enable having a search space and identifying who fulfills an interface. And there's just so many different ways that could go. So it makes sense to move it into something separate. So I will split them. That said, I'm actually really keenly interested in this because I think a lot of people will want it, actually. Just because otherwise you do end up duplicating. Either duplicate bundles, or you end up just saying, I only support one platform. I only support Google. I only support DigitalOcean or on-premise or something. And that limits the reusability.
Unless the
having
people,
like general purpose bundles.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
I was about to say, unless the people declare all the resources ahead of time.
Are you cheating and looking at my YAML? This, you mean? Or
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't quite understand. You saying they declare ahead of time?
I was talking about the polymorphic resources.
Yeah.
You can have the different interfaces, but the user might be more push toward declaring all the different interfaces that should be implemented, but Porter should know those specific interfaces ahead of time.
Are you saying Porter should be aware of what the MySQL interface looks like?
Yeah.
Okay. I had gone in a different direction. And we don't have to get into this. We have like 2 minutes left. Yeah, this just shows we should split it into a separate one because there are different ways we can do that. I went with the bundle describes what it needs its dependency to look like. And then as long as whatever you want to use fits it, Porter can use it. Sometimes it's really hard to get a governing body to say to everyone, this is what all MySQL bundles should look like, if that makes sense. That's what actually prevented Kubernetes Service Catalog from doing this, is getting people to agree and writing some sort of really hard to find interface that the tooling itself understood, you know. So it's just outlines that there's so many different ways to solve this. So let's give ourselves more time to think about that. I think this is a good place to stop, though. Like I said, I'll rework this so that we'll get rid of that last use case, put in a different one.
Do you want to, before we end up, quickly shout out your GitHub settings work recently across all Porter repos?
So excited about this. So if you go to gitporter.github, we have a repository that stores the settings that all the repos in the Git Porter organization should use. These are not interesting, but what is interesting is you can define common labels, and then all the repositories get to use these labels. We just need to add a reference to this file into the repo, and it'll use these as the default settings. Because we have a lot of labels and they're silly and they're hard to copy and paste everywhere. So I think this should be really nice. I tried this out on one called test. And now if we go to the labels, I didn't have to type any of these in. It just made them all for us.
You could extend that to the, for example, issue template and PR templates.
Oh, what a great idea. Yeah. I will add that next. It also has common branch protection rules, which unfortunately, I had to do by hand for every single repo. But going forward, this will make sure it's the same for everything. You know, it says how many reviewers do you need? Can Ralph force push to main just because he's an organization admin? I love picking on Ralph. I don't think he minds. We can say, for example, the DCO status check is always required, things like that, which is kind of nice.
And did you have an example in like that test repo on like overriding? Say I want to inherit these, but I want this repo to have 2 approving reviews.
I've been trying to figure out what exactly the rules are for what you can additively override and what you have to redefine and override. So for example, adding new fields to the repository section, like a description, just overrides description, which is great. Topics though, the base YAML file that I was using had existing topics. The topics were Porter and CNAB. And when I defined topics here, oh, you know what I bet? I think that was supposed to be an array. That may have been my fault, but we'll see. What I noticed is that it just overwrote it completely. I bet that was a problem on my part. I think that's just a syntax error. But yeah, here I was able to selectively override just some of these things. On this repository, because it's a test repo, I don't need like someone to approve me testing stuff out in here. So I turned off needing reviews and things like that.
Cool. And that label, as it has the description of a merged label, it just merges that into all the labels. Cool.
Yeah. So if we go in here is lay test, a merged label. So I get to keep everything else and get that one. So we can have repository specific labels in addition to the common ones.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I'm just going to, when I get time, I'll just submit a bunch of PRs to add this. And then whoever wants to approve them really fast, that'd be appreciated.
Can I suggest adding some labels like the size, like large, medium, and small?
T-shirt sizes.
Yeah.
Are there any other labels that you think would be useful? Or is it just that one?
Just that one.
Okay. I think there's an app that can automatically apply that label so that we personally don't have to decide. So let me look for that GitHub app and enable it too, because I think that will, otherwise it's really hard to maintain, you know, figuring out what an issue, what size a PR is, especially if someone makes changes and then it's different. So that's a good one. Thanks everybody. Oh my gosh, this is a really successful first recorded public meeting that none of the public showed up to. So
That was great. So much content from you, Carolyn.
This is,
thank you.
Yeah, this is what happens when Carolyn can't sleep for a week. Get lots of proposals. All right, everyone, have a great week. It was nice seeing you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.